let's get started here. I want to welcome everyone to TRAK's Zoom Away Blue Friday. Today is Keys to Avoiding Deep Trouble. And this call is, we're very excited about this call. It's super special. It's part of a series that we run consistently that's related to Beyond the Boat. And that includes the 3 steps to kayaking, keys to avoiding trouble, and water equals wellness. My name is Hans. I'm hailing from the wild, wet west coast of British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And today's subject is unclear where it's going to go, but we're going to unpack a number of cool things from a legendary leader in sea kayaking space. You all are all muted on this call. We will be available to open this up near the end of the call, but in order to capture as clean audio as we can, we're going to keep folks really muted here. And I invite you to find your chat room and ask questions there for certainly Jeff and myself and anybody else on the call. So I invite you to find that. And once you find it, let us know where you're hailing from. Let's check out what sort of international audience we have today. Love to really get a good sense of what corners of the world we're reaching in with this call. I know we got Zach Cruzens coming in from Mexico, and internet's not playing nice there. But other than that, that's all the housekeeping. You can raise your hand or go to the chat room if something comes up for questions. A couple of acknowledgements I'd like to make are, we've got a bunch of TRAK pilots on the line. Welcome. We've got Nolan Villar, the managing director of TRAK Kayaks, on the line. We've got Jason Gwendon, who many of you know from the pilot program and from working together to get a boat. And we've got Curtis Heron in the background helping us out with the chat space and any questions you have. So let's get started here. I want to, first of all, introduce our special guest. We're here with legendary paddler Jeff Allen. Welcome, Jeff. Where in the world are you today?
So I'm in a place called Poole Harbour, down on the south coast of England, pretty much dead centre, really. If anyone knows where the Isle of Wight is, then I'm just slightly west of the Isle of Wight.
Okay.
I'm here with a good friend of mine, Hef, and we had a cracking paddle today out in Poole Harbour. Beautifully calm conditions, and you certainly wouldn't think it was in the middle of winter. But really pleased to be here. Really happy to be involved with the whole TRAK program, TRAK pilot. And good to meet you guys, albeit in cyberspace. Hopefully one day it'll be in the flesh.
Let's roll into this, and want to just introduce you a little bit further. So you are respected worldwide as an industry leader, educator and guide, and expeditionary paddler. Some would say you're the guide's guide, if you will. You're also a COCATAP Pro team member. You're a TRAK pilot. Simple question. Do you prefer Jeff or Jeffrey?
Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Only my mum gets away with calling me Jeffrey. Okay. That's normally when I've done something wrong. So
I get it. I'll refrain from that one. So Jeff, let me ask you a question. To start off, you know, you've got a great company that's established as expedition paddler. You're really renowned in the industry as an expedition paddler. Help us understand, what is an expedition paddler to you? What does that mean?
Well, it's someone who sees the sea kayak primarily as a vehicle rather than just a plaything. Not to say that we don't play in it and have fun, but it's a vehicle that gets us out so that we can conduct journeys with a purpose. I always say that an expedition is a journey, but it has to have a purpose. So that's my vehicle of choice and has been for the last sort of 25 years now. Expeditions to journey with a purpose, kayak, paddler, that's the engine. That's what's powering us to get to where we want to go. So yeah, that's for me, expedition paddling. It's a whole, it's numerous things. You know, for me initially, it became a vehicle to access a certain healing environment. You know, I was suffering from PTSD after leaving the military, and it became a really good vehicle for that. But then when I started to experience that coastal environment, I just had this innate desire to share as well. So it was all about getting other people out into that environment and being able to show them what was taking my breath away. And after a while, I guess, instead of looking at the vista ahead of me, I was taking people to that point where I knew their breath was going to get taken away, and I was watching their faces instead, and that's where I was getting a lot of pleasure from. So it was about guiding people safely through those environments, but it was also about guiding people to that wow moment. And I think that's what my purpose has become, really, as an expedition guide, is taking people to the wow factor.
Fantastic. Very well said. I love, and it's really transparent in all the things that you do, Jeff, how your journey with a purpose is a whole systems approach. And I just want to thank you for your generosity in leading with that, and your commitment to sharing that with other people and to making that a possibility. It's really inspiring to me, and I think to many on this call.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. You know, the whole journey has been cyclical, really. You know, I've gone from the recipient of some amazing, pleasurable moments, and then I've managed to pass them forwards as well. So that's it. Yeah, it's a win-win situation as far as never a bad day in the office.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. For folks that are interested, I'm just going to put a link to Jeff's website that I was mentioning before. He runs a company called Expedition Paddler. So I'm going to put this in there. I'll be putting a few links in there. But in addition to welcoming you, Jeff, we've got people from Chattanooga, Tennessee, from Scotland, from Berkeley, California, from Connecticut, from Michigan, from Switzerland, from Rochester, New York, from Anchorage, Alaska, from the Pacific Northwest, from Victoria and Vancouver, BC, from Atlanta, Georgia. Really broad audience here. So thank you once again for just taking the time to connect with us. I don't really know where to start because, frankly, I'm curious and interested in so many things that you do, and we have such commonality that I feel like I could just talk to you for hours. And I'm not sure how to make this just a small bite-sized piece. But ultimately, where I want to go is I really want to explore your work a little bit as the founder of the International Guide Association. And most notably, you have a framework for a professional standard that's called C.A.K.E. So I want to unpack that a little bit, but I want to save that for a minute because there's a few other questions I want to dive into first. And so the folks on the line, you know where we're going. But let's start with this, is that a little bit of notes, I guess, is that, in the early 2000s, you founded Sea Kayaking Cornwall, you founded the International Sea Kayak Guides Association, and you represent the needs of, established aspiring commercial sea kayak guides from around the world. What inspired you to found that International Sea Kayak Guides Association?
Well, as with many coaches in the UK, I was working very closely with British Canoeing, and our national governing bodies, they govern sport, and they represent the club environment very well, and they represent the coaching environment very well. But what they don't represent was the commercial professional guide who was earning a living from sea kayaking. So I found there was quite a big void in the UK, not marketplace, but within the UK paddling community. And I felt that that hole needed to be filled because primarily it was meeting what my requirements were within the industry. We were looking for guides, and how do we get guides? It was easy to get paddlers that had 4-star, 5-star, and to get them to come and work, but they didn't have the first idea about how to actually guide people. So we started training our own guides, and we started to put together a jigsaw of the attributes that we felt a guide needed to have. And then that program became popular, and I gave it the name ISKGA. It became popular more with commercial sea kayakers, professional sea kayakers from other countries. So that's how it got the name international. I think we had about 6 different nations on board before we actually named the organization. And they was basically asking us, where do we find this syllabus? And at the time, the syllabus was all in my head. So I ended up putting it to paper and then putting it onto a website and gradually sharing it, and the community just organically grew. And then the national governing body, British Canoeing, started to feel threatened by that. And I was asked to go and see Mike Devlin, who was running British Canoeing at the time, to explain how I had the audacity to set up an organisation which was now being seen as being competitive with British Canoeing. And I said, well, we're not really competing with you at all, because national governing bodies, they govern sport, they don't govern the commercial sector. You know, and this is very much about the commercial sea kayak guide that works professionally guiding other people on the ocean. And we had a different set of requirements, you know, requirements which I think probably come more second nature in America, because you have such a vaster wilderness setting. So things like first aid, you know, the wilderness first responder course is probably standard for most outdoor instructors in the US and Canada. In the UK, it's normally a 12-hour first aid course, which we found just wasn't fit for purpose. So we needed to develop a first aid program, working with doctors, working with paramedics, and working with other outdoor providers to come up with a program that was going to be robust and suitable for the sea kayak guide.
Sure.
And then we found in other areas, you know, that we needed to go into greater depth of understanding. So we started to branch out into industry. We branched out into the Coast Guard and the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, and into military. So we were looking to the military for certain aspects on sea survival and expedition skills, survival skills.
Jeff, that's fantastic. So in many ways, it's like a, you know, it is you have set the bar for the industry and provided a one-stop shop for those things that are often very modular and sourced from different areas.
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing about the system, is that it's modular, and we sort of set a standard where you need to attain a certain level of proficiency within your national governing body. We're not there to compete with national governing bodies at all. Hopefully, we're supportive of what they do. So the idea is that you attain your Sea Kayak proficiency, your leadership award within your national governing body setting, and then you come to ISKGA if you want to go down that commercial professional setting. And we sort of, since then, the British Canoeing have sort of emulated what we do. They've set up their own guide system. So we had to then refine our place. So Mike Devlin left British Canoeing, Lee Pooley came on board with British Canoeing, and we had a meeting. We said, well, you know, where does ISKGA sit with regards to British Canoeing now? And he said, well, you know, we see you as being that wilderness guide. You know, if you want to go beyond what used to be called the 5-star, you know, where are you going to go? And the logical progression beyond 5-star is to go to ISKGA and look to get your advanced sea kayak guide.
Great, fantastic. So it's an advanced move, and it's really oriented to the more remote destinations. I have put a link into the chat room of ISKGA. And, you know, we've got on this call, and in our community, certainly on, you know, Keys to Avoiding Trouble is oriented towards, you know, intermediate and advanced paddlers. We talk about topics and subjects that are beyond the foundational pieces. How does one join ISKGA, and, you know, is that available right now?
Yes, it is available. We're just going through a whole process of reevaluating on an administrative level. So we're looking at bringing in a new website, making it a little bit more interactive. We're starting to share the responsibility of running the organisation. So we've got at the moment 10 national training centres which head up the different countries, and they're going to start taking on the administration of their own countries and developing their own web pages to actually accommodate that. Because obviously sometimes there's a language barrier, and there's also legal barriers as well. You know, I'm not au fait with Canadian law or American law. So, you know, because I don't understand that, I have to look to my national training centre to ensure that what we're doing fits the regulations of that home nation. So
your compliance has to be basically consistent with every national governing body.
Yeah, and that becomes the responsibility of those national training centres.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Well, let's go back to the expedition topic again. one of the things that's stated, the way that you relate to expedition sea kayaking is it's about freedom. In simple terms, what does freedom mean to you? This freedom you get from expedition sea kayaking?
For me, a lot of it is about escape. We certainly in the UK, we're so closeted with health and safety. It's being able to get back into that environment where everyone's probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Sure.
We take those foundational aspects of the human character for granted now. And what's really nice is when we take people into a wilderness setting and they have to redress that balance. I call it the world of credit cards and double glazing. So I'm trying to escape that world and get back to basics as well. So that's freedom for me is being able to escape that world of credit cards and double glazing.
I love it. That's terrific. I love the term double glazing, but and I love the way you just really tied that to sort of foundational psychological safety has got to be met before you can live a life unleashed or before you can find freedom.
Yeah.
And I love your relationship to, like, if I can get you out and I can get you out of the double glaze and forgetting about things like transactional experiences, then we've set the foundation on which we can build you achieving more freedom and more of a life unleashed, as we call it here at TRAK.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's great, coaching, guiding is all about taking people to the gateway, and opening the gate and letting them free, and I think getting that autonomy, getting that independence, that all builds the freedom of the spirit, the physical freedom that we can all explore. So yeah, a life unleashed, exactly.
Awesome. I love that. So Jeff, you started young as a kayaker. You've been paddling since you were 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
What were you paddling at 7 or 8 years old?
They were really hairy fiberglass sea kayaks. I can't even remember what they were. Snipe comes to mind, but I think they were a lot later on. But they were in the Cub Scouts. You had this sort of annual summer camp where we used to go away to a place. It wasn't that rural. It was in the suburbs of London, and there was a big lake. And I can remember going to the first kayaking session, and we used to have to wear these blue PT shorts and a woolen jumper. And the first thing was to get shoved into a kayak, put a spray deck on, turned upside down with this big hairy gorilla of a PT guy standing next to you, and you'd have to wet exit, swim ashore, and then go and get changed. And then you'd come back half an hour later and you'd go off and do your first kayaking session. So it was that school of hard knocks. It was that cold water shop. It was that half drowning experience, that swim ashore in a heavy woolen jumper and get yourself dried and then go and learn some strokes. And I think that is really valuable experience, because it straight away showed you what, if you didn't have a tenacity to come back and get into a kayak, then you don't really belong on the ocean, So although we have much kinder ways now of introducing people to sea kayaking, I think those early days were really valuable, So yeah, that was my first experience.
That's a terrific story. I'm laughing because that sounds like the first day at one of the TRAK camps or tours. That's one of the first things we do is we shuttle people down to the beach and put them in a boat and turn them over and get them to wet eggs.
Yeah.
And if they come back, they're probably we're safe to leave the beach.
Yeah, I don't think that was my first experience. My first actual experience was in a folding kind of kayak. I think it was actually an inflatable pink crocodile. That was my first ever experience, and it was as a result of that experience that my mum then took me to Cub Scouts. I joined the Cubs, and then I ended up sort of growing from there. And then later on in Sea Cadets, we expanded. We took on open canoes, and then when I was in the army, when I first joined the army, there weren't any sea kayaks really. I can remember seeing the first sea kayaks, but I actually experienced with the very early Nordcaps with the very small screw-on hatches, and they were brand new, sparkly. And I was thinking, wow, it's a very evocative shape of sea kayak, and they were beautiful. Yeah,
it's so fantastic to see your trajectory of paddling and leadership sort of running parallel from a youth as a youngster all the way through Sea Cadets and into the Army. One burning question I have is, as you're paddling in the British Army, how does one soldier from a sea kayak? What exactly were you doing? Was it reconnaissance? Was it access? How does sea kayaks come into soldiering?
Well, I should bring Hef in here, because I never used sea kayaks operationally. You know, I do teach for military now in terms of folding boats. So the Klepper primarily, or the Naughty Ray, those sort of military spec and double 2-man sea kayaks. And basically it's an insertion vehicle, you know, so it's it's an estuarine vehicle. It has very minimal sea state operational capability. So I think they work in a maximum, is it sea state 4? Yeah, is that the maximum? But they obviously train in a higher sea state.
1,000 pounds, they have to do 30 miles, 24 hours.
Yeah, so 30 miles in under 24 hours, and then you have to portage it with all your other kit.
About 6 miles.
Yeah, about 6 mile portage. There's all sorts of attributive skills and stamina, obviously, in the military for it. No, I only used them as adventure training when I was in the military.
I see. Okay, great. Well, that takes us a little bit to the nature of boat building itself. And you've had a stint, I think, going into traditional boat building in Falmouth. Is that right? Yeah. And what was the nature of that traditional boat building you did? Was that skin on frame?
No, it was mainly carvel. I did a little bit of clink, or I think you may call it lap strake in the US. So it was traditional boat building, more yachts, fishing boats, pleasure craft. But then when I left college and I ended up working in the industry, wooden boat building, when I entered the industry, had sort of died, and most of the work was either boat repairs, maintenance, fiberglass work, or building your own kayaks. So I used to build tram dinghies, and I built a few sailing canoes. I built a few sea kayaks, but they were mainly wood strip or plywood. So I stayed in the industry for about 7 years. And then when I left the industry, there was a big resurgence of traditional wooden boat building, especially in Falmouth. Yeah, it became very popular.
Of course, yeah. And so, you know, one of the things that I noticed from some of the content you put out and getting to know you more is that you're really drawn to northern latitudes. You distinguish that as a favorite place to paddle, specifically in Norway, for example. You know, what draws you to those northern latitudes?
When I went down to South Georgia and we were paddling around South Georgia, I fell in love with that place where the mountain just comes straight down to the beach, you know, and blue oceans, steep mountains, snowy skylines, clear air, wildlife. You know, I mean, what is that's missing in that environment? You know, and we sailed all the way down to the South Atlantic to do South Georgia. If I'd have just gone maybe 1,000 miles further to the north of where I live, I'd have found exactly the same environment, and that's what I experienced. You know, I've got a real love for viewing mountains, but from the sea.
Yeah.
If you climb up a mountain, you look out to the ocean, you see a lot of sparkly water on a nice day. The real scenery is when you're out on the ocean and you're looking back at that coastal environment. So I just love that environment. I love the crispness of the air, and I like the contrast between the seasons. You know, so when you go out in the winter, which we call the blue time in Norway, you know, you've got very little sunlight, and you get this very reflective, contrasting sort of colours. But then when you go in the height of the summer and you've got about 24 hours of daylight, it's a totally different environment. Sure. And, you know, the Samis say there's only 2 seasons or 2 days. You know, there's the winter day and the summer day. You know, and that sort of is very reflective in the way that they live their lives.
Great, fantastic.
And also the people, I think, you know, the people always make the trip.
Well, I want to share with folks, you know, a link. You did a beautiful video piece with National Geographic and Greg Dennis, referencing exactly what we're talking, the blue time. That would you say it's more the dawn or the dusk seasonally of the low light area? So I invite people to check this out. It's on Vimeo. I just put a Vimeo link in there. And I think it captures in some way, as close as you can, kind of what you're saying about that, that essence of the northern latitudes. And I love how you've discovered, like, you went to South Georgia, the most remote place in the world, to experience something, and then realize later, well, it was just in my backyard. I think that's so true for many of us in lots of cases. I want to ask you this, you also mentioned that, you've traveled extensively in the northern latitudes in boats you've built yourself, including by Darkas, but you've also paddled, in modern terms, the Feathercraft, the Naughty Rad, the TRAK, of course. You mentioned that there are benefits of folding kayaks in northern latitudes. What are those benefits?
Well, I think the transportability is the main benefit. Having the ability to just be able to get on the plane, fly to a venue, stick it in the boot of the car, get to the beach, no hire charges. You're very familiar with your equipment. I think you have to be more seaman-like. You can't afford to go bouncing off rocks in the same fashion that you might do with a carbon Kevlar or fiberglass boat. But it's that versatility. I was talking to a chap called Brian Wilson, and he was out in Italy, and he had a Feathercraft, Castellano, and he paddled out to an island, and one of the locals reported him to the police because you can only go, I think it's up to 3 kilometers offshore, and this island was maybe 12 miles offshore. He paddled out to the island, and they sent a police boat after him. They couldn't find him, and then they notified the island police, and they came looking for him. And he was hiking down the road at the time with the kayak already loaded back onto his pack. And he said, I got on the ferry with the same policemen that were trying to arrest me. They just didn't realize I was that kayaker. They thought I was a backpacker because it was all loaded back into his backpack. So there's another sort of versatility to the whole folding boat concepts as well.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the simplicity of it as well. And, I think you're very close to what was our lineage, of the original skin-on frame. You feel the water at such a more elemental level. You can feel the flex of the boat. It responds differently in the water. No, I just love it. But as you say, there's so many different aspects to the sport. And that's just one aspect. But, yeah, I think the transportability of a folding kayak is what gives me the most appeal, and the compactness. Now I'm starting to combine my sailing boat with kayaks as well. The great thing is I can get maybe 4 tracks into 5 tracks, 6 tracks into Wild Rover, whereas I'd probably only be able to get 2 hard skin kayaks on board. So yeah, compactness, versatility, transportability, connection. There's all sorts of advantages, certainly for me, using the skin on frame folding boat.
I get it. Now, you mentioned seamanship there. I want to speak to that a little bit. You still work with the military as a subject matter expert for the Royal Marines, which is, I guess, they're Britain's elite amphibious warfare specialists in this area of small boat and crafts. Let's talk about seamanship for a minute. Can you compare for us how Britain's elite amphibious warfare specialist, if you will, and your typical experienced expedition sea kayaker, like many folks on this call, how would you compare their approach and practice to seamanship?
Working with special forces guys, it's really interesting because they are such a robustly built individual. They have a certain tenacity of fitness. There's not many people that can paddle 30 miles and then throw that kayak onto their back and walk across a mountain range, relaunch it, and carry on paddling again. So it's great to work with that kind of physicality in the people. And what I notice when I'm working with them is that I only ever have to say something once, and the interpretation is almost instant. And you're getting very, very quick feedback with them. If I say, okay, guys, this is a sweep stroke, look at the way I angle my blade, place the paddle in at 2 o'clock, take it out at 5 o'clock, carry your elbow high forward. Within an instant, that's exactly what I'm getting. I'm getting a replica imitation of what I've just asked for. So there's very quick feedback in terms of working with these guys. In terms of their craft, they get shown once how to assemble a klepper, and it's quite a complex piece of equipment, and they're instantly assembling it, you know. So
Yeah.
I guess from an instructing point of view and from a guiding point of view, it's instant gratification, because you feel as if your coaching is on a par. But I think that's partly the way in which they are so good at receiving this information as well.
Sure.
When they take these things out and they use them operationally, I think the last time it was maybe used in anger was in the Falkland Islands, and they were used to insert onto the west side of the Falkland Islands, and they were buried on the beach, and then they walked across the island, did their operation, and then they were helicoptered off the island. Those kleppers were dug up 2 years ago, so they'd been under the beach in a saltwater environment, properly caged, and over 40 years later, they'd been dug up, taken out, reassembled, and paddled away from the beach. You know,
Wow.
That's after 40 years. So
what a time capsule.
Yeah, that's pretty good going. Yeah,
That's pretty good going. And that was the old klepper. So they were literally canvas skins.
Yeah, Hypalon, hull skin, and then a canvas deck, and I think it's ash that they use on the frame. I'm pretty sure it's ash. But the way that they actually cage them, there's a special way that they use special equipment that they use for digging them into the sand.
I see. So while we're on the area of seamanship, Jeff, let's go back a little bit to the International Sea Kayak Guides Association. And, clearly you've taken this organization to really set the standard for expeditionary guiding. And one of the key points that you train around the framework is that as a professional standard, that those guides must demonstrate what you call the acronym CAKE at all times. I'd love to unpack that with you for this audience as a framework for seamanship, and help us understand what that is, and maybe the priority system that exists around it, and why you chose these particular elements.
So CAKE stands for currency, ability, knowledge, and experience. So first of all, currency would be having the national governing body qualifications. So you know that on a technical level, you're able to manage your craft. It's like having if you wanted to be a safari guide and you needed to know how to drive your car, you'd need a driving license. So we sort of see the NGB awards as being that driving license. You are capable of running that craft. First aid qualifications, that is suitable for your clientele, but also suitable for the environment that you're going to be operating in as well. So it's making sure that in terms of currency, it's not just the technical ability to handle your kayak, it's also having the first aid qualifications that you require. And then any other associated qualifications as well. So if you was operating in an Arctic environment, are you trained for extreme cold? Can you handle cold injuries? Are you fully conversant with hypothermia? It's all of those sort of extra bolt-ons to what you might need.
Sure, terrific. I love that. So if I could interpret that, currency really is competency that is situationally appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also making sure that you maintain that through sort of CPD. You're always looking to continually develop yourself on a professional level. Yeah.
I love that it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's relative to the environment you're going to be in, the situational, and it's really great to also learn that there are it's mobile, right? In that I know that if I'm going to be guiding in a situation, then I need to be qualified, at least one or two steps above. I've got to be comfortable my own self, a couple of steps above where I'm actually guiding clients in. Yeah,
and the clients you're guiding as well. Yeah, and I think the important way to look at ISKGA is a skeleton. It's if you think of the spine as being the incident management program, and the left arm might be the expedition skills program, and the right arm could be the first aid program. the head could be the leadership program. You know, it's a skeletal system. And then you can take the environmental modules and start to flesh it out a little bit. So we've got on the expedition skills, we've got a winter skills, we've got a paddling and ice skills, we've got a tropical waters skills module. So all of these modules are then there to flesh out that skeleton. So an ISKGA guide needs to be able to call someone an ISKGA guide, they need to have been able to have achieved the skeletal status, and then from there they will flesh out in accordance to the environment that they're going to operate in. You know, so Jamie Sharp developed the tropical waters module for us, and you know, so if you was guiding in Belize, you'd want to go and do that tropical waters module, but it's not a necessity for all ISKGA guides to have that.
Yes,
just
great.
like if you're operating in Mexico, you wouldn't want to have the paddling in ice module unless you're going to be taking a group to Greenland. But the modules are there so that you can grab them if you need them. So we've got ISKGA trainers that can develop or can deliver the skeleton, and then we have a whole series of subject matter experts and specialist module providers who can then develop those environmental modules or deliver those environmental modules to you. So that whole CPD aspect is also about you, the diligence of you as a professional guide to be able to access the training that you need for the safety of your clients, you know, and
Perfect.
for the entertainment of your clients.
I love that. Let me ask you, by the way, for folks who don't know, Jamie Sharp is also a TRAK pilot. Many of you know him. You can find him on the TRAK website under our pilot page to learn more about Jamie Sharp. But if you could offer one quick tip for folks that are on this call, what would you offer? How do you encourage guides to be able to assess their currency? And that is their competency of themselves and assessing their group that is situationally appropriate for what they're about to move into.
We have in our training, we have a whole range of underpinning techniques that we have so that they can assess their group's ability before they take them out into an appropriate environment. So we have a series of tools that we introduce to prospective guides, and we call that underpinning. So it might be testing your clients out on your local surf beach before you take them out to that distant headland and put them into a tide race. You know, you want to make sure that they've got those dynamic skills. Sure. But in terms of you being able to maintain your own perspective and making sure that you're on top of your game, it's all about that continual professional development. It's about meeting up. So we normally have a symposium once a year in Cornwall where the ISKGA guides come over to us and train and do their updates with us. It's about being realistic, understanding that we all suffer from skill fade. So what is your program of development? How do you retrain yourself every year? You know, what are you doing to keep your skills sharp? And, you know, if I'm going to teach, you know, where I live in Cornwall, we have some fairly rough waters. We have a lot of dynamic surf environments, rock gardens, but we don't have the big tide races that you get, say, in Anglesey. So if I'm going up to Anglesey to teach, I'll go up there maybe 3 or 4 days in advance and get out in the races with someone else and no students and just resharpen those skills before I sit down and introduce myself to my clients. So it is about being on top of your own game, you know, and that's a certain amount of diligence there, you know. Yeah.
I love that. I love that how you've really related that to a proactive approach rather than finding yourself in a situation and questioning whether you have that when you're with guides. That's a really great piece. And so let's move on to ability. How would you sort of speak to ability in your CAKE model?
Well, if you think about currency as being the paperwork, and that might be a license that sits in their back pocket. Ability is what we can do with it, you know. So ability is about having the necessary skills to guide and lead others. You know, when you meet someone for the first time, do they see you as a guide? How are you presenting yourself? You know, are you behaving in a way that says that you are a guide? It's not just the ability in the kayak; it's the ability to manage people. It's the ability to have a sense of humor, to lead by example. So all of those leadership attributes. We have a mnemonic called JUBWIC, which is all of the qualities that ideally you want to try and attain as a leader. So we're looking at sound judgment, we're looking at bearing, we're looking at willpower, integrity, courage, knowledge. All of these things go to make up that leader on the water. But the important thing is with a guide is the guide has got to have been there before. Otherwise, how are you guiding? When you guide, you're taking someone to that place that you already know. That you have the ability to take them there safely. You've been there before. Whereas sometimes the leader, they haven't necessarily been there before. You're not being so orientated towards that guiding process. So ability is about having the necessary skill set, but then being able to implement it as well.
Terrific. So the ability could be defined as the skills, both hard and soft, and your professional presentation combined with local knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And in tune with your paper as well. So if you've only got, say, the 4-star or the Coastal Sea Kayak Award, are you guiding people in conditions that you don't have the paperwork to back it up? So all of these things, they sort of interlock together. You can't have one without the other, so to speak.
Right. So with respect to your experience and your certifications.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's speak to knowledge then. How is knowledge different than those two things?
Well, do they have the knowledge of their trade craft? If you think about the ability, that's what's in our body. Knowledge is what's in our head. We have the abilities to be able to do a high brace, but do we have the knowledge as to why we don't extend out into the wave? So we might know it in our body, but do we also know it in our head? So the knowledge relates to our seamanship aspects. It's to the navigation. And also, can they take their knowledge with them? Do they have access to that knowledge? So, for instance, I'm not a practitioner of first aid except when I need it. A paramedic would have that working knowledge and ability on a day-to-day basis. When I go out into a wilderness environment, I may not have had to use my first aid for 2 years. It's going to be that last practical occasion, but I had to use it. But do I take an aid memoir with me? So yes, I do. I take the Oxford Book of Wilderness Medicine, and that's in my first aid pack, and I might have to refer to it. So it's about having that diligence and that tenacity to be able to remember, okay, so some of these things I knew 2 years ago, I need to refresh myself, but I also might need to be able to access that knowledge when I'm out in that wilderness setting as well.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I think that ties to a couple of things. It sounds like one is it's the foundational elements on which skills are simply an application of, and it's seamanship that's combined with that. And I think what you're touching on too is it taps into the stages of learning. How attuned are you to where you're, what you know and what you know versus knowing what you don't know. It ties into that. Yeah, it ties into that area of, what level of competency are you? Are you competent with consciousness or not? And are you incompetent with conscious or not in certain areas? Yeah. I've got a question from the chat room. Where does the ACA or BCA certificates come in?
They're all there. So if you was to look to your national governing body, what you're looking at is your basic leadership award within your home nation. So in Britain, we've got British Canoeing. For a British canoeing guide to be able to operate in British waters, he needs to have the 4-star or the 5-star. So he has to have that leadership award before he can take that extra training. And in America, it would be the ACA award. He'd have to have that highest level of ACA qualification before he really enrolls into the ISKGA program.
Great, awesome. So it picks up where those programs leave off.
Yeah, we don't set the BC system as being a higher system than the American system. You know, we're saying that in your, you know, it's evolved to suit your environment. And I think that's the important thing is, you know, I often say, you know, why do we have the paddlers that we have in our countries? Well, we're shaped by our environment, the same way that the kayak is shaped by the environment that it operates in. And that's an important aspect. You know, in Britain, we have a lot of fast tidal waters, and on the West Coast, we have surf. Well, those kayakers are normally very strong in those environments. But if you go to the East Coast, they may not be quite so happy in that. So we're shaped by that environment. If you think about what we've done so far, the currency, the ability, and the knowledge. Currency is the paperwork in your pocket. Ability is that somatic aspect in your body, and knowledge is what you carry around in your head. You know, so that's how I sort of view those aspects.
And so how would you then unpack experience in relation to those things as part of the C.A.K.E model?
That's a shadow that follows you around. You know, that's what's gone before you. So we build up a backlog of experience. So as we say, the guide has been there before. You know, they've got that experience, they've got that prior experience. And, you know, within ISKGA, we recognize that most people that come to us, they've already got, we don't have people that have never paddled come into ISKGA. They've already got experience. So we need to be able to judge what that experience is and also recognize it, you know. So we have a fairly strong APL process that does accept an ACA paddler, as well as a British canoeing paddler, as well as an EPP paddler, or a Norwegian Paddle Federation, an MPF paddler. So they're all the same as far as we're concerned, because what they're going to get is the 18 days of ISKGA guide training on top of what they've already got. But the experience that they've got, that's what they're bringing with them. And that's, I sort of see, well, if the currency is a paper, and the ability is what's in the body, and the knowledge is in the head, the experience is the shadow that you cast, you know. And when you're walking around, that's what's going to be following you, your experience. That's what's made you who you are up to that point. So we look heavily into logbooks. We've got the APL process, but from a guide perspective, we're also looking at the experience that exists within your group. You know, when I meet my group for the first time before I go on expedition, I'll say to the guys, so what do you do for a living? You know, what do you have in your other life? What other sports do you have? Because quite often you'll find that they've got very supportive skills that are going to be strengths within your group. And, you know, they may not be so comfortable in the environment that you're operating in at the time, but they're a doctor or they're a surgeon, you know. And as soon as you get them out of that environment and get them into a more sheltered environment, those skills might be a real strong asset to your group. And I'm thinking in terms of a situation where we had 4 people kayaking on the west coast of Wales, and one of the girls within the group, she got taken out by a wave, dumped onto a rock, and she broke her arm, she broke her ribs, she punctured her lung, she hit her head, she was knocked unconscious. Well, in that group was a doctor and a member of the mountain rescue team, but both of them were also very uncomfortable in their boat. The guide got her safely ashore, but as soon as he got her ashore, there were 2 people in the group who were much stronger on the beach than he was in both medical and evacuation skills, you know, and they instantly stepped forward. Now, he knew those skills existed in the group. He knew that as a guide, his only responsibility at that time was to get her off that rock and onto that beach. And after that, it was other group members that actually took over. So it's about having that understanding that we don't have all the answers as a guide necessarily all the time, but we do need to really understand what the experience is within our group as well. So it's a combined experience within that environment, but it's also the combined experience within the organization. You know, I've got 30 years of paddling experience, but within ISKGA, we've got 300 years of experience within ISKGA. And it's about being able to share that experience amongst all of us.
I love that. So I love 2 things. One is, you know, I love the way you've articulated this as the shadow that follows you around, and it's the transferable assets that it maybe exists within a group. And what comes to mind as a sailor and, somebody who's really been practicing seamanship for a lifetime is my reputation is what comes to mind when you say that. And I love how you've combined that spirit with the concept of institutional knowledge that, as a member of this organization, there's, resources and assets that really make this bigger than myself, greater than the sum of its parts, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to sit on, in terms of your experience, I wrote something down, skill fade is our enemy, and in terms of our experience, quite often we can look back at what we used to be able to do, and that isn't necessarily what we can still do. We can still have all of this stuff in us, and we can carry this shadow around, but the shadow, as the days get older, the shadow gets slightly weaker, and I think that's an important aspect to really realize, is that I used to be a has-been, there is a stage when, even no matter how strong you are, we all get weak. We all start to lose those skills. So how do we actually manage to do with that experience? We don't want it to wade. We don't want it to fade away. We want to be able to pass that on. And that was also part of what ISKGA was for me. It was about creating a legacy so that the information that I have and the knowledge that I have, I can share with other guides, and it can all be carried forward. It's not a competitive system against national governing bodies or anything like that, and we're non-competitive within the organisation. It's about sharing the knowledge and bringing our abilities forward. Yeah,
fantastic, Jeff. I love the way you've summed that up and sort of encapsulate into two points. One is skill fade is our enemy, and there is an ever-present need to continue to sharpen the saw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific,
yeah.
Fantastic.
Even a sharp knife grows dull in the drawer.
That's really great. So what we've done here is I think we've really speak a lot about your experience really broadly, and there's a lot more I'd love to talk about. We're kind of at the end of our hour here, but we've really effectively unpacked, I think, an orientation to the International Guides Association. I think we've really kind of taken a close look at the K.E.K model as a way that we all as paddlers can look at ourselves and figure out, what are we doing around skill fade? How real is it for us? And what are some action steps that we can take to sharpen the saw? And there's a lot of resources out there. What are some of the go-to things that you recommend for members of ISKGA and folks that look to you as a mentor to really go do to keep those skills sharp that, maybe are on the edge of, been a has-been, if you will?
Yeah, well, not letting them fade too far, too soon is always a good one. So trying to keep active, finding a way. So, sometimes we can't always get on the water. I can remember paddling up the Norwegian coast with a chap called Mark Schoon. Maybe some of you guys know Mark. He's based up in Bar Harbor in Maine. And we had this conversation about what we would do during the winter months. So when we met in the spring to paddle this Norwegian coast, and when I got to him, I found that he was suffering from skill fade. And he said, well, I've only got a swimming pool that I can train in, Jeff. The seas freeze over in Bar Harbor. I can't get onto the ocean, but he was going out and he was getting into the swimming pool, and he was getting onto the ergo machine, and he was swimming in the swimming pool. So he was finding whatever aspects he could to keep his skill fade from becoming too prevalent, if you like. He was working on it in a different way. And I think that's the important thing, to recognize what are the aspects that we need to make up the picture as a whole, and how can we keep little bit sharp sometimes. So yes, I might not be able to get on the ocean 12 months of the year, but there are other supportive skills that I can do so that it's not such a big mountain to climb come the springtime.
That's fantastic. Jeff, you work as a guide and a trainer in a lot of different formats. I know you work in lots of different areas, including Alaska and the northern latitudes in Norway and worldwide. there are opportunities that I see on your website of how to work with you in a group or individually. There's coaching opportunities. You've got a boat that you're doing journeys on. It sounds like it's small enough that you could actually take just a bubble of people if they wanted to come. What are some of the ways that people could kind of specifically work with you if they want to sharpen the saw? And I know we have a European community and a kind of a Western component here. So maybe give us some ideas on both of those.
Well, I think right now we're in an ever-changing situation, you know, because of COVID, and I think it's at the moment we've just closed all our, you know, these two new strains of COVID. Britain has effectively closed its doors, and we've said no one's coming in or out at the moment until these two strains have been identified. And is the vaccine going to work on those? You know, so at the moment we're in groundbreaking times, and I think what we're looking at is being able to talk on forums like this. You know, can we share information in the cyber world? And that's all we have right now. But I'm hoping, I'm praying that we can get back to being able to share symposiums, to be able to get together on expeditions, that we can read digitally magazines and what have you, make videos and keep on sharing the knowledge in that way. I'm more than happy to discuss and to have individual Zoom calls with people, and to just, you know, be as proactive and as interactive as I can with anyone, really. We've just got to be inventive and try and find new ways of doing it. I was out with Hef doing a little bit of video in today, you know, and we was just looking at how can we help people just to find ways of you know, one of the best things about the COVID, if it's best, that's not necessarily right. So one of the good things about the whole COVID thing, certainly in Britain, is it's making people spend a lot more time in nature. I think we've suddenly reevaluated the value of being out in the natural world, you know, and I think it's going to be a very good healing environment as well for us, you know, although it obviously does carry an awful threat as well. Yeah. But yeah, we just got to keep sharing, really, find ways of sharing.
Great.
Contact me at expeditionpaddler.com, and we can find some way of maybe making that connection if people wish to. Yeah,
sure. Terrific. I'm going to put the link to Expedition Paddler in the chat right now for folks. I'm also going to put in the link here, Jeff. You've got both a personal Facebook page, and I've grown aware that you use that as a channel of communication. So I'm going to put that page, as well as I'm going to put your Facebook page for Expedition Paddler, which is kind of a more of a group page. Kind of specific to the organization. I know you're really good at placing engaging content on there, like the most recent Land's End trip you took just a few days ago. Yeah. That's really fantastic. And, you know, we've been in communication about, we also are pivoting because, you know, are really well of the commitment that TRAK has to also helping to build confidence and competence in the area of helping people use their kayaks and accessing nature and engaging in the healing process. We've been in discussion about also having a one-on-one skills accelerator virtual coaching program that's a multi-month engagement that's more of a mentorship, and we've got you slated on that to come up. How do you see your time ability to actually being able to take on some clients in that format?
Up until May, I've just had, you know, this COVID situation again. I've just had 6 weeks of work have to cancel on me, so I've suddenly found myself with 6 weeks of free space, you know. So right now, yeah, I'm pretty good on that. I think the time difference, you know, we probably need to find from this side of the pond to the west side of the pond. We've probably got to try and find a suitable time of day, but I'm pretty much free, really.
Sure, terrific. Well, thank you for that, Jeff.
I leave for Greenland.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Certainly until I leave for Greenland in June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. Well, for folks that are interested, you'll be able to find that link in the coming days on trakkayaks.com under our Skills Accelerator program. And the link is in the chat space for expeditionpaddler.com, as well as your Facebook page for X Paddler or Expedition Paddler, as well as Jeff Allen. I know you're really vigilant and really responsive on Messenger in both those channels. I've also put your Instagram page there. Anything else you'd like to share with this audience before we wrap it up, Jeff, for closing?
Just stay safe there, guys, and just keep connecting with the environment. You know, it's, yeah, that's our office, and that's what we need to look after. Yeah, so yeah, stay safe, guys. Really, really good. I feel really honoured to have been here today, and although I can't see anyone's faces, it's been absolutely great to be a part of this.
Terrific, really. Well, we've got this open. I want to thank you for your time, Jeff. I want to thank you for your generosity in not only the work that you do as creating a legacy for your experience and your life, but also for your work in setting the standard for guides and really being a strong messenger of the need of traveling with a purpose and a whole systems approach. I think it's a really beautiful piece and essential that we have messengers like that in modern times.